Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Melissa Heatley and I am the Marketing Manager for NSF-ISR and moderator of today's webinar. We're going to jump into the agenda. So first, I will provide some brief introductions of our host, who will then outline NSF-ISR's position in the current pandemic, as well as our path forward using an alternative audit process. Our hosts will then touch on some of the new ways we will be asking clients to transfer information and connect with us throughout this alternative process. So let's jump into some of those introductions. Our host today is Don McFarlane, who is the Aerospace Technical Manager for NSF-ISR. Don has worked as a quality engineer, quality director, facility security officer, consultant, lead auditor, and auditing instructor in various aerospace, medical, and commercial goods manufacturing organizations. He presently works with the America's Aerospace Quality Standards Committee, AAQSC, and resides in northern Utah. Don is accompanied today by three of our NSF-ISR business unit managers: Mike McRandall, Business Unit Manager of our Aerospace and Automotive Management Systems programs, Marty Willem, Business Unit Manager of our Quality Management Systems programs, and Joy Kensington-Longery, Business Unit Manager of our Environmental Health and Safety Management Systems programs. And with that, I'll hand it off to you, Don.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you everybody for joining us today.
Okay, every good class has to start with a survey or a poll. This is no exception. So we're going to do a couple questions here just to get a take on how much it's impacted you. To what extent has your company been impacted by the COVID-19 situation? The answers of we've lost work, we're about the same, we're busier than before, or we're closed. And we can see a pretty substantial percentage of the organizations are in the we have lost work realm. A lot of companies are just trying to feel their way through the situation, not knowing what the future looks like. Some orders have been closed or temporarily suspended, just waiting for, I guess, some stability in the economy or in the ordering. Yeah, pretty interesting trend. For those that are in that non-essential category, or you're closed as a result of this, our hearts go out to you. Hope that you get open and get back to work as soon as it's safe and possible to do so. Next question: how are your personnel being managed through the COVID situation? So this is a select all that apply kind of thing. We're doing nothing different. No outside personnel are allowed. Operating with social distancing in mind, so everybody's at work and just keeping our distance. All personnel working remotely. A mix of remote and social distancing, so those essential workers, if you will, the people that have to be at the plant are there. The rest of you are working from home or working remotely. And then for those that are in that closed bucket, yeah, we can see a majority here are going into the social distancing piece, just trying to maintain their distance, but also keep the lights on, keep product moving out the door. Such a unique time right now where everybody's just trying to satisfy their customer, trying to keep some revenue coming in, but also trying to maintain the health and safety of the workforce. So quite interesting. Now with that in mind, we'll ask the last question here. Has COVID impacted the employees of your organization? And this is passing of an employee or family member. It's a tragedy. Employee, family member hospitalized, employees with a confirmed case, family members with confirmed case, exposure to a confirmed case, no known exposures, and don't wish to answer. So we can see data points developing here all over the place. Vast majority of no known exposures. Unless you're in one of those regions, the bigger metropolis areas that have been hit pretty heavily, it's pretty easy to not know somebody that's been impacted or not be exposed to those folks. I live out in Utah, and we're at 2,200 cases in a population of just shy of 4 million people. But I've been impacted. I've had a friend of mine catch it and do the ambulance thing, and we've been exposed to it quite a bit. For those that have had employees that are impacted or, unfortunately pass away, again, our hearts go out to you. It's with that in mind that we're going to have this next conversation.
So now we'll go through NSF-ISR's position on the current COVID-19 pandemic. As you may know, NSF is a global health and safety organization. As such, our primary concern is on the health and safety of both our team members as well as our clients. Auditors are at risk for being a carrier of diseases as they go through airports and are exposed to large crowds traveling from location to location. So therefore, they would make a risk factor associated with COVID-19. We don't want to have that as a concern for us or for you. So the decision was made in North America to suspend all on-site visits through May 31st. The original release to that said May 1st. That's since been expanded because our leadership team meets every day and reviews the current state of affairs associated with COVID-19. And the situation warranted extending that deadline or that line in the sand currently to May 31st. Another key note associated with that is right now, 1 August is the day that we're allowing remote audits to occur through. And I'll get further into that as we go in the presentation here. But May 31st is the day that we're currently working to for no on-site audits. So between now and May 31st, there will be no on-site audits performed by NSF-ISR within North America. It's being evaluated for each country and each region of the world based on their current state of affairs. But within North America, we're doing no on-site audits between now and May 31st. Subject to change, that we don't know about the pandemic and where it's going to be going. So at this point, we're keeping an eye on it, but May 31st is the current line in the sand that's been drawn. Now with that, let's talk about some of the industry relief that has been offered for the various schemes. The current position that's been taken by the IAF, International Accreditation Forum, as well as accreditation bodies and industry oversight bodies, is to allow extensions of dates and or remote auditing to occur for a variety of schemes, with some not allowing relief or have not released their relief options yet. As you can see with the IATF, both the IAOB and IATF have extended the dates for audits, but there is not currently an allowance for remote auditing. So going back, May 31st is the date or the end of the window right now where NSF will not be performing any on-site audits. So if your on-site audit is between now and May 31st for IATF, it will not happen and it will not be a remote audit. So the account managers are going to be working with you to better understand the situation and come up with an approach that works for you and your certificate needs. We'll talk more about that as we go. For the other schemes that are listed here, there has been some relief. We'll talk about what that might entail or what the options are based on the individual schemes. But first, we want to talk a little bit about the process. The IAF has a document, and it's informational document number 3. It was published back in 2011. And that document is titled the Informative Document for Management of Extraordinary Events or Circumstances Affecting ABs, CABs, which are certification bodies like us, and then certified organizations, which would be you. This is not COVID specific. This is for anything that's classified as an extraordinary event. The unique thing is COVID has been classified as an extraordinary event, which allows us to use the guidance document or the informational document. And it's not something that any of us ever envisioned that would happen, but it's there and it's available and it's something we can now use. Other industries have added additional requirements on top of that. Namely, the IAQG has created the Resolution 157, which gives us specific guidance on what is and what is not permitted. In addition, the IATF has their global waivers document that explains what is permitted and what isn't permitted. So more to come on the different topics there, the different allowances. Next, we'll talk about some limitations in auditing. The limitations associated with remote auditing, again, not allowed for every scheme, but the IAF has a paper associated, or a standard, a procedure associated with this as well. And it's IAF MD4, Mandatory Document 4. That document is associated with what's called an Information and Communication Technology Audit, or an ICT audit. And that's the proper term, or the industry nomenclature for a remote audit. ICT audits are allowed to be in any method of communication where we're not at the same location. They're not very specific about what that entails, but they do say that the CB has to generate a process about how to address this. And informational document 12 talks to some examples that are used on the accreditation or oversight processes, and we're supposed to use those as guidance as well. Now with that, they've approved surveillance and recertification audits to be conducted via ICT. There is an approval process based on the CB process that's mentioned there, and we'll talk more about how to go through that process, but they have permitted, based on it being an extraordinary event, they have permitted surveillance and recertification audits both to be conducted by ICT or remote methodologies. There are limited approvals associated with transfers. In a lot of cases, those would require accreditation body approval on a case-by-case basis. So the guidance is we can do them as long as there's a reason to do it. This is not an opportunity for us to go seek out new business because we can do a remote audit. We need to make sure that we're taking care of current customers, ensuring accredited audits are being done with the utmost integrity. But if somebody truly needs to transfer, or if there's a logical reason for a transfer, they're willing to entertain that to be done remotely. At present time, there's not an allowance for stage 1 or stage 2 audits to be done via remote technology, with the exception of a handful of stage 1 type activities for different schemes. And those were previously allowed. So as an example, some of the environmental schemes allow the stage 1 activity to be done remotely or offsite. AS 9120 is permitted to be done offsite. Other than that, it's not permitted offsite. And those are not based on COVID. Those are based on existing rules. In addition, special audits for scope changes, which would include addresses, certificate changes associated with your scope of registration or the activities that are listed, those are not to be done offsite as well, because it's going to be extremely tough to confirm all of those new activities. The other time they're not going to be allowed is organizations that are not able to facilitate. And we'll talk a lot more about what that means and what it looks like. But if you can't facilitate an audit from an infrastructure standpoint, or we're not open and operating and have no evidence to view standpoint, it doesn't make sense to do a remote audit. This isn't a pass on an audit. It's conducting an audit via a virtual environment versus a in-person environment. So if you're not able to create the ability for the auditor to be there remotely or virtually, it's not going to be an allowable thing. It's not going to be permitted. And then IETF at present time does not allow for remote auditing either, so it's just something we can't do under that scheme today. As far as the path forward within NSF, right now we're working to prioritize. The priority is placed on clients that are coming up in the next couple weeks. There's a mass email that's going to be coming out in the near future from remote audits at nsf.org, and it's going to have the procedure outlined along with some links to the resources we go through or talk about in this presentation. If you don't receive that email and you have an audit upcoming, you'll want to make sure that you check your spam filter, you check your quarantine filter, whatever it might be within your system, because it's going to be there within the next couple of days. And that's going to be the trigger point for anybody that hasn't received the communication yet from their account manager. But the priority is definitely being placed on stuff that's coming up in the next couple of weeks, or stuff that was scheduled within the next couple of weeks. In addition, we're prioritizing recertification audits because there's an expiration date associated with those events. If your certificate expires in early June or July, it's definitely a priority to get through the process so that we don't risk or compromise your certificate if we don't have to, okay? If you're able to facilitate the audit, we'll go through the process, we'll get you a new certificate, and we want to make sure that we're not compromising the certificate you have in place so that you can continue to do business and work with your customers. Then after that, it'll be surveillance audit activity due within calendar year 2020. As we know, every audit or every site's supposed to be audited within the calendar year. There are a few exceptions to that for sampling plans and reduced surveillance plans when they're permitted by scheme. But for the most part, everybody's got to be visited within the calendar year, and that really is the condition or criteria for reviewing suspension of certificate, is if we don't hit the annual requirement for auditing. So we need to make sure that we're looking to meet all of those audits within the time slot that's allowed, and that we're facilitating the audits that need to happen more quickly to ensure the certificate isn't impacted. NSF is going to maintain the infrastructure to ensure minimal impact to those certificates, and that means account managers, auditors, all of the personnel that you'll interface with, because even though we will be conducting the audit, we still need to make sure that our turnaround time on those certificates isn't a problem. Now with that, we all know that the situation is unprecedented, and we really don't know what we don't know as far as how long it'll last or the impacts to businesses and whatnot. So there is a commitment from NSF to keep the infrastructure, but we don't know what that infrastructure looks like. And the only thing I can say is be patient. If you don't hear back within a day or two, feel free to reach out again. If you're not getting the response from the person you're reaching out to at NSF, there should be a point of contact that you can escalate to, or a different person you can contact. But the expectation would definitely be that there's a response back within a day or two. With the next item here is to manage the resource risks. And what I mean by that is if we have a whole bunch of surveillance audit activity due in calendar year 2020, and we make a decision to push out some of the surveillance audits that can be pushed out, there's a chance that we create a demand for too many audit days later in the year. So at this point, we're not too keen on just pushing everything out or pushing everything further in the schedule so that we don't put people's certificates in jeopardy later in the year by having this bubble that we can't manage. So we're trying to manage our capacity as well, trying to look at that from a risk standpoint, ensure that we have enough resources to ensure continuity of certificates and whatnot as we progress through this. Again, a lot of dynamics to this. We truly have no idea as far as how long it will last and whatnot. I don't think anybody really has an expectation there. And that's where our leadership team is meeting daily to discuss changes and new developments and things like that. So we're constantly evolving the plan and it's being communicated. We'll talk about how you can stay tuned to those communication methods upcoming in the slide deck. So you're asking in your head, what do I do? This is great, but what do I do? And the answer is, once you receive that communication from either the remote audits at NSF email address or through your account manager, there's a survey that you're going to fill out. And this is an application of sorts where you're going to confirm a few things. One, what's your preference? Do you want to facilitate a remote audit, or would you prefer to conduct the audit on site? Not every company or not every process is capable of being handled through a remote audit. Sometimes we don't have the technical aptitude to manage a remote event, or we don't have the infrastructure to manage those remote events. So that's part of the vetting process as well. We need to make sure that you're capable of hosting the remote audit, and that it's not simply an exercise, and it's not a waste of time, right? We still need to conduct an effective audit, and we need to make sure that we have the ability to do that. And that's part of the criteria for this application. We're also going to look at other risk factors, whether they be export control requirements, ITAR, EAR, Canadian controlled goods, whatever they might be, to ensure that access to the records won't be a concern, or streaming video of certain processes won't be of concern. Those are the kinds of things that are going to be asked on this simplistic application. It's about 3 pages long, a bunch of yes/no type questions with some room to expand on it. That'll then be sent back to your account manager, who will facilitate an internal review through the technical group at NSF. So all you do is send that back to the account manager. The account manager is going to send it off to the appropriate technical person. They're going to do a review of the individual circumstances for your certificate, your site, making sure that we have the answers that minimize risk, and if not, we'll identify the plan associated with how to mitigate those risks. And if there's additional information that's needed, the account manager or the technical rep will definitely reach out to you to let you know. Either way, it'll be dispositioned for the most appropriate approach, whether it's a remote audit or otherwise. You'll receive some clarification back from the account manager or the technical person, and they will coordinate with you on the next steps. Okay, and that's step number 4 there. As far as considerations, again, we're looking to see, is this a surveillance or a recertification audit, and the expiration date. We're looking for the activity level of your organization. Are you operational? Are you, business as usual? Are you restricting who can come to the facility, or are you restricting certain activities because you just don't have the customer demand to facilitate or to warrant everybody being operational? Are workers being remote, or are they operating remotely or telecommuting? Because that's going to have an impact on how we assess the company and what activities can be assessed. We're also going to be looking to see if the company is closed down. Unfortunately, there's a lot of companies that have been forced into a non-essential bucket and forced closure type of situation, which is heartbreaking. But if we can't assess activity, there's really not a ton we can do, even via a remote audit. So we need to understand the circumstances and the activity level at the organization. We need to understand the infrastructure you have to facilitate the remote audit. Network bandwidth has been decimated, with schools being soft closed, kids being forced to stay home and doing videos, conferences with their teachers, and a lot of telecommuters. So the ability to host a video conference on certain, internet service providers might be compromised. Your facility may not have enough signal strength through the facility or through the building, through the site, to host that meeting or to support that meeting. In addition, there's got to be a virtual meeting platform, something that meets your information security requirements and something you're comfortable with to support the audit. It's not necessarily about sharing faces and seeing people on the screen. There's a need for you to share ERP systems or access into your quality database or into your environmental records so that we can perform an audit no different than sitting in the conference room or walking to a stakeholder's office. We need to be able to see the objective evidence. We need to be able to interview with those stakeholders and process participants. And if we just can't do that, that's going to be a problem, whether it's for the fact that those people aren't there or that the ability of your infrastructure isn't supporting that. We'll take those into consideration, but we need to make sure that we can facilitate an effective audit. In addition, we need to make sure that we have the ability to send files back and forth. Email is only capable of supporting so much from a size standpoint, as well as an information security standpoint. We'll talk more about that in the near future as well. There's some additional risk factors that are being considered as a part of the information document 3 criteria, and those are on the application. So those are the things that the technical group is considering, again, for each individual client. As far as the remote audit platform or the conferencing platform, we need to ensure that we're providing each customer with a service that's conforming to their information security requirements. And when I say customer, I mean your customer, your end user, your government agencies, whatever they might be. They're prescribing to you in your criteria, in your contracts, what the information security requirements are for your organization. They might include NIST 800-171. They might include the CMMC directive that replaces that in the near future. Export control requirements like ITAR or EAR, or maybe the GDPR type directives. We don't know. NSF auditors are informed, and we know things about your organization, but we don't necessarily know everything about your organization. As such, the onus is on you to make sure that you're conforming to those requirements, and you need to identify a platform that meets those information security requirements, something that you can still share stuff with the auditor, but not violate those requirements. So that's a pretty important step in finding a platform, is understanding what your information security requirements are. In addition, that platform needs to be something you're comfortable with. If I impose a requirement that everybody is going to use Zoom to meet with me or whatever service I stated, it's a service you've never used before, perhaps, and you wouldn't be as effective in conducting the audit. So we're putting the onus on our auditors to become comfortable with whatever service you're using, because you're going to be a lot more effective at performing the audit, at facilitating the audit, if you're using a service that you're comfortable with. Now, with that said, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and in a lot of cases, you're going to need a couple different services to facilitate all of the different needs here. We may have, a web conferencing platform that we use to do some of the administrative processes, but as you go out onto the factory floor to look at activity out there, it may require, say, a FaceTime video or WhatsApp video kind of a thing, so that we can see activity being performed and talk to the people that are performing it in real time. The expectation is that our auditors are not just looking at records or outcomes, but actually looking at the process being performed and the activities being performed as they go. So that's pretty important. Some of the possible dispositions then associated with that technical review, and the reason we talked about the platforms here is because that's a big part of the vetting process, is ensuring that you have a platform that meets your needs. And probably the biggest thing that we tend to reject the application for is if you don't have a platform identified, if you don't have the ability to host that audit, it's going to get kicked back for clarification because it means that you won't be able to facilitate it. But if you can facilitate an audit remotely, that's certainly an option for us in most cases. Again, as allowed by scheme, up to 100% remote auditing is permitted for the 2020 events. We know that those remote audits aren't as effective as an on-site, face-to-face type audit. So with that in mind, NSF has made that decree that any audit being conducted prior to 1 August today can be remote if they qualify. Any audit that's going to be conducted after 1 August, we want to be on site so that we're still maintaining the integrity of the audit process and ensuring that we're giving you the most effective audit we can. That date is subject to change, and again, we'll show you where you can stay up to date on stuff like that. But that is an opportunity, or that is an approach that we can take this year. I never thought I'd see a day where industry allowed 100% remote audits, but we're there because of the extraordinary circumstances that COVID has presented. Another option for us is to move the audit out into calendar year 2020, later into calendar year 2020. Again, a couple constraints there is we don't want to create a bubble, and we don't necessarily know when the COVID situation will end. We all hope that it'll get over pretty quickly, but if for some reason this extends into Q3 and we have moved a whole bunch of audits into Q3, now we're in a different position where we put some risk onto certificates because we've got a really compressed timeline to get through a whole lot of different audits, and that might be a challenge. That might present some risk associated with the certificates, and that's the reason for the asterisk associated with that one. The third option that's listed there is the cert expiration and restore or reinstate within 12 months. So what that would look like is as an example, my certificate expires April 20th, okay? If I can't conduct the audit before April 20th because I'm closed, or say I conduct the audit and I'm not able to get through my corrective actions prior to April 20th, my certificate would still expire on April 20th, okay? Once I conduct the audit, close the corrective actions, and the cert decision is made at NSF, the new certificate would be reissued. Say that happens May 31st. So from April 20th to May 31st, I would have an expired certificate. If you're in the aerospace scheme, there's a notation that's made within the database, the OASIS database, that indicates it's ID3 or COVID related. For those that aren't in that scheme, there's going to be an awareness that it is because of some COVID related problems, okay? But once you get through that process, your new certificate would be issued, and it would be valid from 21 April. So it would go back to or revert back to the original cert cycle dates. So it'd be valid from 21 April 2020 through 20 April 2023. You wouldn't get a new expiration date based on we didn't finish the process until May 31st. It reverts back. So 2 years from now, when you look back, it'll still show that you've been certified the entire time, doesn't break the integrity of the cert, and more importantly, it doesn't require you to start over and go through a stage 1, stage 2. Now, previously, that was only a 6-month window, and you had to have started the audit prior to expiration date in order for that to work. So there is a little bit of relief in that they allow for audits to occur after the expiration date, and they've given up to a 12-month window for that to be completed. Very cool option, but again, it would show as an expired certificate until we can conduct the audit. Now, if your business is closed, that probably won't be an issue to you. And I can tell you firsthand, the primes, the big boys in industry have agreed that we know there's going to be fallout. We know that we're going to have expired suppliers. They're making exceptions that allow for it as long as it's known in advance, right? It's not an opportunity for you to just skip out on audits. This is COVID related. This is, we're not operational. We're not functioning. We can't conduct an audit. Therefore, we can take advantage of this extraordinary circumstance allowance. The last option there that's listed is when permitted by scheme, there would be an allowance for extension of the certificate expiration. That would entail, back to my example where we expire on the 20th of April, we would do a shorter duration special audit now, and that would include looking at records of management review, corrective actions, internal audits, those kinds of things. From there, if everything looks good, we could grant up to a 6-month extension on the cert validity. So instead of April 20th, it would move out into October 20th of 2020. And you would then conduct the on-site recertification audit before then and get any corrective actions associated with that closed out. If for whatever reason we can't conduct the audit between now and the October timeframe in that example, it definitely presents risk to the certificate, and we'd revert back to that third option of your cert goes into an expired status and you could still reinstate it. But this is only an option in certain schemes and not allowed for everybody. But it does permit for a brief extension of the certificate to hopefully make things better in the current situation and then get back to on-site auditing. So for remote audits, really the audit planning process needs to be more robust. If you do get approved for one of those remote audits, work closely with your auditor to ensure that you understand the personnel that are going to be involved, the activities that they want to look through. The requirement is going to be, and there's slides to talk to this in a minute, but the requirement is still that all processes are evaluated. All clauses of the standard are evaluated, but activities may be limited. If I don't have receiving inspection available, but I can still look at the whole of the purchasing process, that might be okay. The reason I say that the planning is important is to make sure that the auditor knows in advance the receiving inspectors are not working right now because we don't have product coming in. Therefore, we need to make sure that we're kind of working around this, look at a couple records. It'll be recognized as a missed area and it gets added later on, and we'll talk to that as well. But to help in that process, to make that more effective, consider sending your auditor a list of personnel that are involved in performing those processes. That way they can build the plan to say, I want to talk to this person, I want to sample this activity or this line. And that'll make the logistics of you organizing the remote audit a little bit easier, a little bit better, because you can create meetings associated with it. Give the other folks involved access to the meeting rooms, those virtual meeting rooms, or you can arrange for time for them to meet with you out on the production floor, okay? It's certainly going to reduce downtime through the audit so you don't have to go hunt for people or work out computer logistics type issues at the time of the audit. Pre-planning goes a long way, especially in these remote audits. If you don't have the pre-plan at least 2 weeks before the audit, reach out to your auditor. Audits that are recently converted or stuff that's being converted over the next couple of weeks, meaning your audit's supposed to take place first week of May and it's now going to be a remote audit versus it was planned to be an on-site audit. That may take a little bit longer, and it may not be the 2-week mark that you get the audit plan. But the general expectation is that you have that audit plan in hand at least 2 weeks before the audit. If you don't, work with your auditor, work with your account manager. Another consideration is to send meeting invites, because people need to understand what platform you're going to be using. Some of those will require software drivers to be installed, and it may require working with the IT group at our company to have the permissions enabled to allow that driver to be downloaded. So we want to make sure that we're looking at that. In addition, consider a test run a few days before the audit to ensure that the connectivity issues are mitigated, or potential issues are mitigated, and that all the drivers are functioning, the microphone situation is working, et cetera, et cetera. It's a whole new world for all of us, so just a little bit of upfront planning goes a long way. On your side, testing the system and ensuring connectivity is pretty important. And in particular, as you're walking around that noisy production floor, you're not going to be able to hear speakerphone on your computer or on your phone. Have a headset. Have a headset that has sufficient battery life, or that you can plug in and use to communicate with the auditor and answer questions as you're walking through the facility. Okay. Ensure that you have the ability to maintain your company's requirements on social distancing and still allow those workers out on the floor to talk to the auditor as much as possible. I mean, obviously, we're not going to have you take your cell phone into an explosive environment or into a clean room or anything like that. But we need to make sure that we have the ability to interview those stakeholders, interview those process participants. So if you just have one headset out there, it may be a challenge for you to share that, or for you to maintain that 6-foot perimeter if you're having to hold the phone in front of somebody's face. So you may need the mask or whatever your company protocols are. Okay. Team auditors, if they're used on your particular audit, team auditors will require a separate meeting room. No different than they would if they're on site. If I've got 2 different auditors working, they're not going to be sitting in the same conference room interviewing 2 different parties, because it creates way too much distraction, too much dialogue, right? It's ineffective. So we want to have separate spaces for them to work, whether it's on-site or in the virtual environment. This means we're creating a separate meeting room or a separate virtual meeting for them to operate in. We need a separate guide to facilitate that audit. It's not going to be effective if you are, the contact and you've got 2 auditors coming into your facility and you're going to be hosting both of those meetings on your laptop. It's just not going to be effective. So consider that. And then ensure connectivity in the facility area where the activity occurs. And what I mean is, walk through the production environment with your laptop or with your phone or whatever it might be, so that you're able to ensure the Wi-Fi doesn't drop. You don't have a dead spot. If you're going to use your phone for FaceTime, know that kills your battery very quickly, or your laptop may have a terrible battery as well, and you may need to have breaks built in to charge that. So those are the kinds of things that you want to test out, make sure that you're prepared for. Some limitations associated with remote auditing. We will not ask you to violate the law. Your technical data, or any technical data you may have, anything that's export controlled, if you can't share that via the platform, don't. If you can't violate your customers' requirements, don't. There are exceptions to the type of data that we are allowed to share here. Intellectual property should be covered under our non-disclosure agreement. But if it's truly an export required thing, you work with your security team to make sure that you're not breaking the law, not sending stuff that shouldn't be sent. If at all possible, our auditors are going to work with you on non-regulated, non-export controlled samples, because we're not product auditors, we're process auditors. We just use the product or the job or the work order as the evidence to show that the process was reviewed and working or not working. So it's not as important to see a particular type of product, but it's important for us to see the process in action, and we use that product as evidence of the process outcomes and activities being done. We understand that processes are going to be implemented in a different fashion than they were, say, in yesteryear, right? You may have a limited workforce on site. You may be operating in a different way, whether it's remote worker doing activity, or some of that activity got consolidated based on furloughs or temporary layoff type actions. We're looking at the process that you're doing at the time of the audit. We understand that there may be limitations in certain aspects of that process, but we still need to look at the process. Some of those activities may be tough to review remotely because of the environment that they're in or the activity being conducted, and we'll keep that in mind. If we truly can't review a particular activity, we'll defer that to the next on-site event. But at a minimum, the processes that are selected, those need to be reviewed. We need to ensure that the clauses associated with those processes are reviewed, and we have evidence of conformance or non-conformance for each of those clauses. If there are activities that may be limited in their sampling, those are the ones that we would defer. Back to my example of the purchasing process, I can look at the purchasing activity, I can look at the supply chain management type activities, but receiving inspection isn't working right now, or warehouse isn't working right now. I understand that I can't talk to those people. I can't see the activity. Through the audit, you would show me, say, the area where it happens. We'd look at a record or two, and then we'd make a note in the file to say limited sampling in the receiving inspection, and then that'll get further assessed at the next on-site audit event. We still have to audit the processes and the people involved, not just the forms or outputs. So this isn't you sitting in your office as a quality person and facilitating the audit entirely. This is us, no different than we should be doing now, walking out to the different processes, the environment where those are being executed, where they're taking place, and talking to the people that are doing those jobs. With the exception of aerospace, we don't have to cover the off shifts. Off shifts are encouraged, but not necessarily required. Now, on the aerospace side, all of the shifts where that process is being executed, we still have to cover those. We still have to assess those. So it may be a couple sessions or a couple meetings throughout the day to ensure that we're able to cover those off shifts, because we're still capped at the 8 hours a day for most schemes, although we may be able to blend a couple days into one calendar day depending on what's allowed for the scheme. Some additional thoughts: these audits won't be as effective as an on-site audit. We understand that, we know that, but that doesn't mean they don't have to be ineffective. Audits are meant to be of value for you. It's a fresh set of eyes coming in to confirm that everything is working the way it's supposed to, or that everything is working with the exception of this. As such, we need to take advantage of that. It's going to require some trust on our part and on your part to ensure that we're sharing information and not necessarily hiding. Well, not necessarily, but not hiding information. We don't want to be hiding information. We want to ensure the integrity of the process. So it's important for client and auditor alike to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as that goes. Make as effective as possible. If we can't come up with a way to do it, think outside the box. Be creative on how to share it, whether it's recording a video and emailing it, or sending pictures, or even an audit I went through was on Facebook Live. Somebody did that, then they deleted the Facebook Live event. Again, it's up to you as a company to determine how you're going to share that information, but we need to make sure that we're giving the auditor the information that's needed to assess the processes associated with the audit and collect the objective evidence to show that it works. The auditor is still going to have to confirm the scope, so whatever scope you're certified for, scope of registration you're certified to, there's got to be evidence to support that. So make sure that we're able to support or show activities that are surrounding that scope of registration. Now, as far as information transfer, NSF is following an ISO 27000 information security systems framework. As such, we recognize the vulnerabilities in email. Emailing sensitive information is really risky. There's a lot of potential for stuff to be intercepted, right? So we want to make sure that we're giving you the opportunity to send that information as securely as possible. It was a pretty costly investment. We're not expecting every company to do that, but we have an offering that we're going to talk about here. It's called Move It, that is all of our auditors have access to. And if it works with your information security requirements, it's pretty easy for you to send documents back and forth with the auditor invite. We'll talk more about that in a second. The preferred communication is going to be through the auditor's NSF email address. A lot of auditors may have an @Gmail or a personal email address or something for, say, their business, their LLC type business. We don't understand, or we can't control the security protocols associated with that. And we know that the NSF framework is conforming to our security requirements. So we want to make sure that all of your communication goes to that @nsf.org email address when you're talking with our auditors, just so that we can ensure the most secure methodology possible. Okay. Now, as for that Move It platform that I mentioned, again, this is a tool that's available. Our preference is that no documents are being emailed to the auditors. If you're going to share information with the auditors, you're going to share documents with the auditor, and you have your own platform, that's great. If you don't have a platform, again, this is an available option for you, something that NSF invested in. There's a lot of information available on the Move It site that can share that talks to the encryption characteristics and all that stuff that's way above my knowledge level. And I'm sure we can send some information out with the recording on what the high level information associated with Move It. But it definitely an option that's available. If it's something you want to use, just like the virtual audit platform, talk with the auditor about it so they can send you an invite. It essentially creates a FTP location where you can share those documents back and forth for the audit with some expiration dates so that they don't just live in cyberspace forever. So yeah, look for information on that. If you have questions, you can reach out to us. Now, as for information on how to stay connected with us, because we know this is a very dynamic situation, a lot can change overnight. We have a few resources that you can use, and really any of these or all of these are great. We've got a couple barcodes that are here. If you point your camera phone at those barcodes, it's going to take you to the NSF LinkedIn page, and that is this barcode up here. If you just point your camera phone there, your browser should pop up and say, here's the LinkedIn page for NSF. Subscribe to that page because that's a great resource for us to use to communicate very quickly to everybody and let you know of changes that are upcoming without flooding your email inbox and risking that getting put into a quarantine or a junk mail. So definitely keep an eye out for anything that comes to the LinkedIn page. In addition, an option for you is our website, nsfisr.org. Again, that barcode there is going to take you to the NSF webpage. Information is also available in the NSF Connect site, and that is available online, as well as there's an app I know it's on the Apple platform. I would assume it's on the Android if you're one of those. So download that. You can log into your account and get some information there. And then look for those email updates that are coming, that are being pushed out. And just stay tuned for changes that are coming up there. Additional resource, you can use that code to take you to the NSF International COVID page specifically. And it talks to the changes that are coming, as well as links to some of those resources that we mentioned, and the guidance documents that may be published, like this qualifying for a remote audit. This one is sent out as a hyperlink in the communication from your account manager, but it's a good, quick snapshot of what do I need to have in order to do a remote audit. And it talks through a lot of the stuff that we've just gone through here in this session. In addition, the frequently asked questions, including those that came out of this session, those are going to be updated frequently in there as they're being asked, hence the name, frequently asked questions. So those are going to be available to you and updated constantly, with updates being pushed onto the LinkedIn page as necessary. As an example, one of the questions that we've gotten quite often was, is there a cost difference or a cost associated with the remote audit? And honestly, there's a savings because you're not paying for the travel associated with the auditor getting to your facility. In addition, you don't have to buy us lunch. But on a serious note, there is a cost associated with the auditor travel. Even if they're a local auditor, you're paying mileage for them to get there. And that isn't something you have to pay associated with the on-site audit, or with the remote audit, rather. So that is addressed within the FAQs. And again, that's available on the NSF COVID page. This is the point where we'd go into some FAQs or questions and answers that come up through the meeting. So go ahead and put those into the chat function, or continue to put those into the chat function, and we'll address those here in just a moment. Before we get to that, we're going to allow our business unit managers an opportunity to present or share their thoughts, add their opinions here, anything that they want to clarify or anything specific that they want to address for their respective business units. So we'll start with Mr. Mike McRandall, who's the Aerospace and Automotive Business Unit Manager. Mike.
Well, thank you very much, Don. Excellent job, by the way, and thank everyone for attending. And the only thing I'm going to say will relate to the automotive end. Don has covered everything aerospace, and during the Q&A, anything that speaks to aerospace, he will also address that. But I do want to let everyone know there are a number of questions popping up about remote audits as it relates to IATF. As of this moment, mid-April, there are no remote audits for automotive or IATF audits. The IATF themselves are meeting every 2 weeks to discuss this, but they've had a few already where they turned it down. That's not to say it won't happen or that it may happen in some capacity. So just know that as of now, there are no remote audits, which means with NSF, seeing as how our auditors are grounded until the end of May, we will not be doing automotive audits in this time frame. I do want to touch on one thing. Don did mention that those dates are flexible. They will always be looked at on a daily basis, and we look at the changing conditions in the world and in the particular regions. So don't give up on it. If you are looking to contact your account manager and ask that you have something in mid to late May, is it possible that there would be an on-site? And that is not out of the realm of possibility. It's just not right now on the radar. So do know that things can change on a daily basis. Again, Don, thank you very much, and I think I, as myself, going to sign off.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Joy, who is our Environmental and Health and Safety Business Unit Manager, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Don, Melissa, and Mike, and for all of you who've taken the time to spend with us today. We greatly appreciate it. I'm the Environmental Health and Safety Business Unit Manager, and the one thing I did want to say that is if you looked at the list of different types of standards that we audit to, the environmental management system and the occupational health and safety management system and some of the responsible care management systems, depending on the complexity and the risk or the processes that take place at those particular locations, that may be considered higher risks based on potential environmental impact and or potential occupational health and safety exposure. And so as of right now, mid-April, we are not allowing for those higher risk facilities to have remote audits, but we are looking. The decision has been made, but still continue to take a look at our website, and we will reach out to any clients that might fall into this category. I'm looking at potential remote, a combination of remote and a combination of on-site. We're working through some technical issues with respect to reporting, but that might be a possibility. But in the meantime, it's really important as we go through this to be flexible, and then as your organizations start up, again, there's special environmental and occupational health and safety concerns that you need to be aware of and think of, especially as it relates back to the clauses related to emergency management and a startup for unusual or shutdown conditions. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. We want to be sure that we're flexible and adaptive and meet your needs and protect the environmental health and safety and public safety of our clients, our auditors, and the community, as well as ensuring an effective audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. I've put up the contact information so that you can be copying that down if you want to get their information. This is the point where we'll turn the time over to Marty Willem, who is the Business Unit Manager for QMS, and Marty can share his thoughts on it as well.
Thanks very much, Don, for the introduction and for doing a wonderful job on the presentation. For the QMS business unit, we want to make sure that everyone is safe and healthy, and that's why we're doing the remote audits for 9001, 13485, 27000, and 20000-1. So if you do have any questions, please refer to the contact page at the end of the presentation, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about these programs in the Quality Management Systems business unit. Thank you very much, and stay safe.
Okay, thank you, Marty. Now we'll get into a couple of the questions that have come in. Keep those questions coming. Okay, thanks for everybody submitting those questions. Now we'll get to answer a few of them. Trying to group and categorize them as much as possible, just so that we don't have a ton of redundancy in the questions. So bear with me as I do that. The first group of questions here is really tied to the 20996 form, the application process. The general questions surround when will we be contacted, and when should we expect a form? If your audit is coming up within the next couple of weeks, reach out to your account manager if you haven't heard anything. If you haven't seen the form come through, check your spam filter, check your junk mail, because it came from or will be coming from that remote audits at nsf.org email box. So it may have been put into that group. But realistically, we need to have that done a couple weeks in advance just to make sure that we're not compromising the planning process of the audit and giving you ample time to go through that planning activity. The next question surrounds the auditor, and it's, will the remote audit still be performed by our same assigned auditor? And the answer is it depends. meaning the benefit of a remote audit is we can really work to provide any auditor, because you're not paying the travel expenses. So if we're sending a California-based auditor over to the East Coast via ICT or through a remote audit, it doesn't matter. We can certainly get back to a more local auditor for on-site activities, and that's always our approach, is to get as local as possible. But for the remote audits, it's more important that we get it done within your timeline, but we will definitely work to keep the same auditor if at all possible, just because there's continuity of the system. They understand your people, your operations, your building layout, etc. So it's much more productive for you to have that continuity of the auditor and the auditor that knows you to be able to perform the audit. We have a ton of questions surrounding the automotive side. Short answer is, at this point, automotive audits are not happening. Through May 31st, as of now, NSF is not doing any on-site audits, and because IATF and IAOB have not offered any leeway for remote auditing, we have no ability to conduct audits for IATF clients. That changes, or if that changes, it'll be communicated through our social media platform or through our website, so stay tuned. But at this point, we are not conducting any IATF audits until at least the June timeframe. So if you do have an audit scheduled for IATF standards between now and then, certainly want to reach out to your account manager and find out what the plan is, and get rescheduled as much as possible. There's a lot we don't know as to how long this is gonna last, and there's some risk associated with moving audits into June if, heaven forbid, we do have to push it out. But it's definitely not going to be happening between now and the 31st of May unless something drastically changes. Okay, so the next question here is there a chance my early July assessment audit will get bumped to accommodate other folks? I'd say the answer is no. The only people that are going, or the only way that audit is going to come unscheduled, if you will, is if you make the decision that you can't facilitate it at that point, or if for some reason our auditor can't do the audit, meaning they're sick and they have to drop it or something along those lines. As a rule, the company won't take you off of an audit or take our auditor off of your audit to reassign them to another audit at a priority or from a priority standpoint. We have enough available auditors to go allocate one of them to it versus taking somebody off of an already confirmed audit. So the next question says, the form for a remote audit has been completed. How long must we have a response from NSF? And I would assume this means how long until we get a response. And the answer is usually within 24 hours, and that's what we're striving for. Obviously, the volume of communication has increased as a result of the COVID situation, but we definitely strive for a response within 24 hours. Typically, the process will get these forms approved within a matter of 30 minutes if there's nothing else going on. But when we've got our technical resources tied up in meetings like this or in report reviews and whatnot, it may take a little bit longer. But in general, 24 hours. If you haven't heard back on it, feel free to reach out to your account manager and just check the status. The next question is dealing with the execution of audits. It says, we require intrinsically safe devices in plants? Would it be acceptable to NSF to interview operators in a conference room setting, as we may not be able to have appropriate devices carried into the operating areas? Through the 2020 cycle, and as we're doing these remote audits, we've been encouraged to be creative in how we approach them. Obviously, we're not going to do anything that is unsafe if it's a matter of not having an intrinsically safe device. If we can watch from outside of the area via video or a conference, that we do that, and then we can pull the operators that were executing the task inside of that environment, we pull them aside and talk to them in a safe space where we can ask them questions about the activity that was being performed. Again, we're not going to compromise safety, but we definitely want to talk to the folks that are executing those activities. The next couple questions are surrounding the expiry and the extensions associated with the certificate. It says, can an organization opt to let their cert expire and run with the reinstating within 12 months? Would we need to justify and get approval, or can we just request it based on what we see in the current environment or needs to be? Yeah, it's an option to not conduct the audit as long as it's COVID related. The exclusion, or excuse me, the exception will apply here. If it is not COVID related, if it's just you don't want to do it, all bets are off. But I think it's pretty easy to justify stuff as being COVID related at this point. If we can't facilitate the audit, we don't do the audit. We can push it out until after expiry and make the decision to go back into it at that point. The current rules allow for 12 months. That may change. We don't know. So I don't want to say that you've got definitely a 12-month safe window where you can do that. The rules currently allow for 12 months, but that could always be adjusted by IAF or industry bodies as the situation evolves here. And it could be shortened or reduced depending on the situation. Okay. So there's some risk associated with that, but at this point, based on what's allowed, yeah, that's an acceptable option. With regard to the corrective actions, question was, what about on-site verification of majors with a certificate that expires in April of 2021? So majors don't always require on-site verification. Given the nature and the severity of majors, we typically do on-site verifications. In this case, on-site is replaced by ICT or that remote auditing. So we would simply do a remote audit to facilitate the verification of the corrective actions. And that would be just another event that's scheduled with your auditor and your account manager, and it'll function very similar to an on-site audit. We just do it via the remote technology. Next question. The form for a remote audit has been completed. Oh, we already did that one. Excuse me. Sorry, I lost my train here. Next one. What happens if we are good to go on a remote audit and partway through the remote audit something fails? Again, this is something unique to this year. We're going to be flexible as much as we can. We're going to try to be creative. If it means extending the audit day, we'll work with you. If it means moving into a different day, we'll have to work with the account manager and the auditor to ensure that they've got the availability to do it. But overall, we really want to get the audits done as much as we can so that we don't put the certificate in jeopardy, and we get you the accredited certificate that you need to continue to do business or satisfy customers, or just give you the level of comfort that you want to ensure that your processes are operating at the potential that they can be. The next questions are surrounding follow-up. Is there a defined frequency for conducting the on-site visit after remote audit? Or another way that this is asked is, are remote audits followed up with an in-person audit for those portions that can't be completed remotely? And the answers for those will be, it depends. The current ruling allows for us to conduct the off-site or the remote audit. And if there are activities that can't be confirmed, can't be verified, can't be fully evaluated, that activity is going to be moved into the next audit, whether it's a recertification audit or a surveillance audit. The 2021 audit is when that would be verified. There's some notations that would be made by the auditor to ensure that we do follow up on that. There may be some additional time required associated with that follow-up, but we would move it into next audit event. Now, the other side of this coin is if we're talking the surveillance, or excuse me, the special audit with the recert, if we're doing that special audit to extend the cert validity, there absolutely would be a on-site recertification audit later in the calendar year, hopefully before the expiry, just so that we can ensure the validity of the certificate and issue the new cert. The next question, we have already received the form for surveillance audit scheduled in mid-June. What's the deadline to complete and return? The sooner you return it, the sooner we can get it responded to and the sooner we can get scheduling. Some reminders on the dates right now. Anything that's before August 1st can be done remotely. Anything that's after August 1st, we're hoping to be on site for those. If we can go on site, we want to, we need to, because it's going to be a more effective, more efficient audit. So anything before August 1st can be remote. Everything after May 31st can be on site. Anything before May 31st has to be remote. NSF won't allow our auditors to go on site before May 31st. Next question is the inability to do a stage 1, stage 2 audit the NSF-ISR interpretation, and is that true across all CBs? The IAF declaration allows for some stage 1 audits to be done, but it's going to be scheme dependent. As we talked in the webinar here, the stage 1 for an 9120 and maybe the environmental standards can be done offsite, can be done remote, but the stage 2 activities definitely need to be on site. So we want to make sure that you're effective in your implementation and that all of the audit objectives have been met fully. And it's really tough to do that via ICT audit if we don't have an established system. So we want to be as efficient as we can in the audit process. We want to be as effective as we can in the audit process. And for a new certificate, before we can put our name on it, before any certified body can put their name on it, we really need to have that on-site event. In the aerospace world, they've absolutely made it very clear that there's no stage 2s allowed, no scope changes allowed. The only special that's allowed right now is for transfers, and that transfer audit has to be approved on a case-by-case basis through the accreditation body. Internal audits, how long or how will NSF approach impacts to an organization's ability to do internal monitoring? Really, internal audits are based on your planned arrangement. So if your planned arrangements say we're going to do it once per calendar year and we haven't had the ability to do the audits prior to NSF coming in, that's fine. As long as you're following your internal requirements to the schedule, you're following your planned arrangements to ensure that your system is valid, is conforming. Just like we're having to be creative, we'd encourage you to be creative and ensure that you're, exercising all of the opportunities possible to review your system and ensure that you're doing the best you can to perform that review. If you're not physically not able to do the audit, is there an opportunity for you to do a remote internal audit of the activity of the processes, just so that we can get through it and hopefully make yourself better as a result? Is it possible for NSF to loan a webcam? Unfortunately, we don't have webcams to spare. They're available on Amazon or whatever provider you want, and you can get them for fairly cheap if your laptop or your computer doesn't have one embedded to it. You can probably even host a meeting on your phone or on your tablet or something like that, but we don't have the webcams. And to expand on that, I don't need to see your face, because really what we're looking for is the documentation to be shared. As we get out in the production environment, then it might be necessary to have the camera so that we can talk to the people out there and we can look at the activity being performed on the line. But we don't necessarily need the webcam for conference room activities. because we're going to be more interested in the content of the documentation versus, counting nose hairs or something like that. So the last question here that I have is, how about opening, closing meetings? Do we need to conduct those, and does the company staff still need to attend? And I'll encompass a couple different topics into this. One is, this is an audit. This is no different than if I were sitting in your room conducting the interviews in person. We would still bring everybody together to share the message of here's what we're going to do and here's what we've found at the end of the audit, right? No different. We want everybody to come together, have those conversations. Instead of being in person, we're going to do it in a virtual environment. If you have a conference room and you can maintain your appropriate social distancing inside of that conference room, that's great. If we need to invite other people into your virtual meeting room and they can do it from their office, that's great. But altogether, it's no different than the on-site audit, and well, with the exception of some of the travel expenses, right? Because you're not going to have to pay for the auditors to travel, and that's going to be the fee reductions. But the audit should be conducted as if we were on site sitting in the same room with you. So I'll give everybody just one more minute to enter a question. If we have any more, we'll put them in. I don't see anything else. So at this point, we'll say thank you very much for attending and wrap up with some closing thoughts.
Okay.
All right, so that's the end of the presentation, everybody. Thanks again for attending. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us. We appreciate everybody doing that. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any one of us or to your account manager. We'd be happy to answer those or get you in contact with the right person to answer those. Most importantly, make sure you're staying safe, wash your hands, and thanks for attending.